Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, or as we like to call it, the Tri-F Podcast, where we try not to mess the podcast up. And today, I'm in a little bit of pain, Cody. I want to tell you why I'm in a little bit of pain.
Tell me why you're in pain.
All right, well, there's a book I read many a time growing up, whenever I thought I was going to start a business, be a businessman, and it was called Think and Grow Rich. And it turns out that the dude from Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, he was tied to the occult.
Yeah.
He was tied to the occult. And so I feel a little bit like I read his book like 4 or 5 times growing up, like over the years. And I feel like that line from Toy Story where, you know, Buzz Lightyear jumps off the stairs and then like breaks himself and Woody grabs him and he's like screams, "Years of academy training wasted." That's how I feel. I feel like I've wasted just like giant portions of my existence listening to a cult member. Cool. And so we will start off with a video from Melissa Daughtry. She has a book I want to actually plug because I read it this week. So let me actually, I always forget a tab. There's always something.
Can I disagree with the title of the book real quick?
Think and Grow Rich?
Yeah, Think and Grow Rich. You can't. Thinking is bad.
I disagree.
You can't grow
so
rich
much,
by thinking. I mean, like what?
That's true. You can't grow rich just by thinking.
You're right. You have to do stuff.
Well, yeah, you got to do stuff like visualization, Cody. You got to make a chartboard.
Thinking and go do stuff. That's it.
I bought cardboard. I bought cardboard. I cut out a picture of a giant mansion. I taped it to the cardboard, and I visualized it and said, "This is mine, this is mine, this is mine. I believe, I believe, I believe," 37 times. I thought, isn't that the kind of stuff we're supposed to be doing, Cody? Or are you talking about work or something?
So. No, because you're going against the will of God. Because it's not your will but the Father's, right?
I thought it was just easier than scraping cow poop out into a pit or something. You're talking about spiritual stuff, or my mistake.
Well, I mean, you have to stop thinking, and then God's will be seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and these things will be added unto you. That's what I'm trying to say.
Didn't we talk about this last week?
We talk about this every week, Gary.
Every week, over and over and over again. Okay, well, we'll talk about it more as the show progresses. I got the tab I was looking for up. This is her book, and I want to plug her book. I read it. It's actually very good. So, Happy Lies, Melissa Daughtry. I am so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name. But, this is talking about the New Thought movement, which has, been creeping into the church for forever, and apparently nobody's realized it. I learned a lot. And actually, what made me very interested in this, Cody, is she actually is aware of the origin of some of these terms that Bill Donahue, that guy that annoyed me so much, was using, like the Christ consciousness and all that. Because when I first heard that term, I was like, what in the 1984 is he talking about? Well, it turns out that's actually a thing. Like, there are some people out there who don't believe that Christ is real and that there's it's weird. It's like there's Jesus, the man who unlocked the Christ, which is apparently something that's in everybody. And I guess it's like a throwback to Satan's whole we can all be like God's thing. But Christ isn't. But Christ, well, that's what the New Thought thing is, apparently. But Christ isn't actually a physical being, like a man who died for our sins. It's all allegorical and all this. It's a whole thing.
I mean, you can believe it really happened and that it's allegory as well. Like, cast your nets to the right side. It's like, think with your right brain. Like, your left brain is where your thoughts come from, which is full of it's the part of the brain that's attached to the world, your physical reality, the flesh. And your right brain is your spiritual brain. So that's when you stop thinking and let God's will come to you. you know.
Well, how do you know if it's God's will and like not just you? Like if you're not trying to like look for a accurate interpretation of scripture, like what it actually meant in the time and place, like if you're looking for just allegory, like how do you know when it's not, when like how do you know when it's him and it's versus when it's you?
Because I mean, that's a tough question because you have to kind of just experience that yourself. Once
Yeah,
you
see,
like practicing getting rid of your thoughts, like that's a really difficult thing to do, is to get rid of all your thoughts, bring every thought into captivity.
well, I don't even know what that means, and I don't even think that's possible to like get rid of all your thoughts. I think you're
But it
always
takes a
going to
lot
be
of
thinking of
practice. That's
something.
what I'm saying.
I think
So like you
something's going to
won't
spill into your
know.
head pretty much no matter what, but
I mean, you can try it, or you can just keep saying that.
I already did try it. That's the problem that I run
It
into
takes
whenever I do that
practice.
sort of stuff.
That's what I'm
Well,
saying.
how long?
It's
How
It's what
long?
monks do. I mean, monks do it for years before they get good at it.
Yeah, but here's my concern with that. I would say that the problem with stuff like that is people will very often give you impossible rules that are way too ambiguous to follow. And then whenever you don't accomplish the goal, then they're like, you didn't do enough. Like, for example, I used to be very
That's
fat.
what orthodoxy is.
Yeah, that's why I'm not orthodox. So
Right, but this is simple. It's like just get rid of your thoughts. That's the only rule.
there's no way to do that. Like it's not physically
Yeah, there
possible.
is.
Like let me give you an example. I used to be very fat. You remember? I was like, I guess at the time, I guess you would say it was like, I was 35 pounds heavier than I am now, but I used to be like 224, right? And one of my big problems was people would always tell me to eat healthy. So I had no idea what that meant. I didn't understand macros. I didn't understand protein, carbs, and fats. I didn't understand counting calories. In fact, I was told not to ever count calories because that's just a bad thing that legalistic people do. I was told that all you need to worry about is eat healthy. And so one of my attempts to lose weight was a failure because I was quote unquote eating healthy. But you see, Cody, coconut oil is very, very healthy. It's incredibly it's incredibly calorie dense, but it's very, very healthy. I didn't know that.
There's a reason Hawaiian culture is historically fat.
Again, yeah, I didn't know that. So it's like, I gave up the Little Debbie's. Why am I not losing weight? Well, could it be that I'm lathering my sweet potatoes in coconut oil?
Could be.
Maybe. But you see, I was told not to ever count calories. So I didn't look at the stupid chart to see how, or at least not very closely. I didn't look at the calories on the back very closely to see how much I was actually eating. I wasn't measuring what I was eating. And so I was given this ambiguous criterion that I couldn't possibly follow and that I didn't know enough to follow. And so I was sitting there going, why is this failing? Why is this failing? Why is this failing? And people would just look at me and go, well, you need to do more. But that doesn't help because what am I supposed to do? How do I?
You should have been doing less.
I should have been eating less, but I didn't know that. So, no, actually, what changed it for me was basically rejecting the idea of eating healthy and realizing I just needed to count my dad blame carbs or calories. I just needed to count my calories. I watched the Hodge twins when they were a big thing, and they were doing their like workout stuff, and I watched them eat Chick-fil-A but count their calories and have abs, and that was enough to convince me, okay, maybe I should abandon this whole eating healthy thing and just count calories. So, I think that you need specific terms, and when you sit there and go like clear your mind, empty your mind of all thoughts, when people obviously can't do that, or at least not for very long, then it's like when they eventually fail, somebody just looks at you and goes, we'll just try harder. We'll just try harder. And so it's always like this never-ending hamster wheel, so people with bad ideas don't have to take the responsibility for the doctrines they're teaching people. So I get nervous for statements like that don't seem to have an end goal or a definite line of success, because you're never going to clear your mind indefinitely. So whenever you're unhappy, then people just go, well, clear your mind again. And like it never ends. You understand what I'm saying? Like, yeah, like I said before, it's a hamster wheel.
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, I think it's the whole. This is the whole crux of the argument of the Bible. Like, the reason Jesus was so prolific is because he he cleared his mind all the time, and he was like in line with the Father's will, and he didn't have his thoughts interrupting what God wanted.
Well, how do you know that?
I
Like,
don't know it, but
what
that's
makes
what I
you
think,
think? What makes you think he was clearing his mind all the time?
because he was not doing his will but the Father's. He said it over and over.
Doesn't that strike you as a tautology, though? Like circular thinking?
I don't know what that word means.
Circular thinking.
Circular.
Like, I know Christ cleared his mind because he did the will of the Father, and I know he did the will of the Father because he cleared his mind.
Um, I guess I don't understand the question.
Well, when you're thinking like circular, you're having a premise, but the evidence that you're using to defend your premise doesn't really actually like defend your premise, because you're just assuming that your evidence is connected to the thing you're asserting. So you're assuming that God, like Christ was doing the will of the Father because he cleared his mind.
No,
But
because he said he was.
okay, so you're saying,
Christ's words are my only evidence, I guess. So if you don't
but he
want to
never
take that,
says anywhere that he cleared his mind.
he said, "Take no thought, cast your nets to the right side." That's what he was saying.
No, that's like talking about fishing. Like, cast your nets to the right and you're going to get a bunch of fish. That's not an allegory for clearing your mind.
To you, to me, it is,
But why though?
because it makes sense.
How does, like, why does it make sense? Like, you got to give me
Because
like
your
what
left
when
brain is. I explained it a minute ago.
okay, when I read the story of the apostles not catching everything and then Christ saying throw your nets on the other side of the boat and then they grab a bunch of fish, like, I'm assuming Christ did a miracle and they caught a bunch of fish. I'm not tying that to the mind in any particular way, and I
Well,
don't know
think
why
about
you
that in
would.
reality. How silly is that? That the fish would all be on the other side of the boat. That's
So do
ridiculous.
you don't think the story actually happened then?
That's not what I said. I think it could have happened, but I also think it's allegory.
Okay, well then why would you say it's silly?
Because because if have you ever been on a boat?
Yes, I've been on a boat.
Have you ever looked on the left side and there's no fish, and on the right side, oh, a whole bunch of fish?
Yes, that's why it's called a miracle, but why is that silly? I mean, it's a miracle that it's supernatural, but
Yeah, it sounds far fetched. It sounds far fetched, right?
okay, yes, because it's a miracle.
Okay, so it's probably an allegory.
So you're saying because it's far fetched, it didn't happen.
That's not my only proof, or
Well,
that's not the only thing he said. He also said, "Take no
so
thought."
so do
I
you
mean,
think it
you
literally
can't
happened or not?
misinterpret
Like,
that.
we need to nail this. So, do you think that the story of the gospel happened literally?
Personally, yes,
Okay. So
but I think
your
the whole
contention would be,
story is I think God made the whole story happen the way it happened so that it could be extrapolated out allegorically.
okay. Now see, that's interesting. We needed to get this established because this ties us into Napoleon Hill, believe it or not, and what he believed. So you had this whole new thought idea that Melissa Dotrey talks about in her book Happy Lies. I don't remember if I did plug that. So, okay, so you have that. But there's a school of thought that the Bible isn't meant to be taken literally at all, and that Christ's death didn't actually happen at all, and that it's all just allegory, that we're supposed to interpret it in some abstract sense.
I'm
So,
willing to interpret that, or I'm willing to entertain that interpretation. But like I said, I believe it probably happened because,
okay.
you know,
So,
I
but
just do.
you're making a different claim though. You're talking like kind of a dualistic interpretation. You're saying it happened literally, but it also happened on some sort of, I guess you would say, meta spiritual level, like they were paralleling each other or mirroring each other, perhaps. These
Yeah.
the literal
I just
story is
like, dude, I
paralleling like
wasn't there,
something higher.
so I don't know. I'm keeping my mind open. That's all I'm
Oh,
doing.
that's fine, but keeping your mind open, you're still allowed to have like opinions and thoughts, even if you're entertaining other opinions and thoughts. I mean, I'm just curious as to what you think.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I think it makes a lot of sense to apply the story internally.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, I just think you can use it for both.
Okay, well, yes, you've got life lessons. So Christ obviously came to earth, even by the literal interpretation. He came to earth to set an example for us, right? Show us
Yeah.
how to live. So we're obviously supposed to derive lessons from his example
Hmm.
that literally happened. I guess my question would be, is that what you mean? That we're supposed to live based on his example? Or are you talking about something else, like maybe more metaphysical, perhaps?
In what particular? I'm not sure what you're saying.
I'm asking, do you think that the Gospels are we should just take the lessons directly from Christ's example in terms of how to live? Or do you think there's some kind of difficult to define higher spiritual meaning?
I'm not sure it's difficult to define. I think you have to. I think if you say it only happened this way, like you're handicapping yourself.
Well,
You're not
okay.
allowing yourself to see
So it
different meanings.
only happened when you say only happened this way, do you mean like only happened literally or like only like
Yeah, if you read the Bible and you're like, this happened literally, this is a historical document. You're stopping yourself from gaining any internal knowledge that it gives. Like
okay.
cast your nets to the right side. If you apply that to yourself, that means take no thought. Like you can say it doesn't, but you're stopping yourself from being able to use the story for that purpose.
Yeah, that just seems like you can subjectively apply the stories for anything though. That's kind of what I'm concerned. I'm like I need to
What
know
else could you
why
apply it to?
I so but in that case it really doesn't have any meaning beyond what you give it. Like there is no objective meaning to it if you don't have a criterion at all. Like say for example, like you're saying that cast your nets to the right means use the right side of your brain. Okay, like
Yeah.
let's say that there's some kind of Hebrew word or some kind of connection that would draw like a parallel between a net and a brain. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like if that were the case, then I could see what you're saying. But with the story about, Christ doing a miracle showing the disciples that he's God, like to sit there and without any reason at all to kind of draw a metaphor about the mind out of that just seems it seems like you could make the Bible say anything under those circumstances.
Mm, like what else? I don't understand what else you're like. What else could you make it mean?
Uh, Sorry, hang on. I'm making sure we don't have anything going on in the chat. Um,
Oh, I'm watching it. We're good.
okay. So, let's say I wanted to justify killing somebody. I don't know. I'm just pulling an example out of the hat.
Sure.
All right. Let's see. What will be a good way to justify that in a completely bullcrap way? Let's say, what if I said Zacchaeus when Christ said Zacchaeus come down from that tree, Zacchaeus coming down from the tree was a metaphor for killing a man when he repents, so he'll be liberated and sent to heaven. Completely nonsensical.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Exactly. That's the point. It's not supposed to make sense. But I could give you.
To the right side makes sense to me.
But why? What's the distinction? I gave a completely bullcrap analogy about Zacchaeus coming down from his tree being a metaphor for killing Zacchaeus. It's complete hogwash. But what's to separate what I just said from what you're saying? Like why do you think it's a metaphor for your mind?
Because I don't have any direct other examples, but I mean historically your left brain is your flesh brain that thinks about earthly things, and your right side of your brain you don't use. Why is that? It's because it's the spiritual side of your brain.
Where are you getting that from?
I have no.
Like, I'm just curious as to where you heard it. I mean, I'm not. Like, I can't really, like, argue or agree or disagree because I don't know where you're getting the ideas from. I would just say that, I would primarily read it from the historical context and use literary criticism as my criterion for interpreting stories. I wouldn't just subjectively give it allegorical meanings without a cause. It sounds like what you're saying is like because there's a correlation between left and right, like we're supposed to derive a meaning from that direction, I suppose. But
there is two hemispheres of your brain, yes.
I don't know if that's a strong enough connection, but that seems to be the only connection. But yeah, so I don't know if I agree. I just feel like there needs to be more to interpret it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's more there, but I just don't have it for you. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm just interesting. So
yeah, but I mean, those aren't the only two verses where he says not to think. I mean,
I don't recall. I've read the Bible many a time. I don't recall him ever saying don't think.
Take no thought.
Take no thought. What does that mean? Like what?
No thought.
Because we've already didn't we quote that last week? Like we went over that. What was that? That wasn't even in the Gospels. That was Paul.
Look it up again. Was it?
Yeah, I think it was Paul. All
right. Matthew 6:34. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself.
Was it second? No, that's not it.
Each day has enough trouble of its own.
We demolish. I have. Let me pull it up here. We got Bible Gateway. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God and take captive every thought that to make it obedient to Christ.
Yeah.
So taking captive does not mean pushing the thought out. And the point, and like, again, you got a qualifier here, to make it obedient, or at least a purpose, to make it obedient to Christ. So you're taking the thought captive with the purpose of making it submit to Christ's will. Like, you know, so...
What does that mean to you?
I would take it to be, like, in accordance with, like, the law. Like, Christ doesn't want you to lust. So if you have a lustful thought, then you need to think about that person in the way that Christ would think about them, not the way that you would think about them. You know? To make something obedient to Christ would be to obey what Christ told you to do in the Gospels. So when he says, don't look at a woman with lust, you know, you would look at the woman, I guess you would say, with love. The way Christ, you'd try to picture her the way Christ would picture her, i.e. not in a sexual context. But he told you what he expects, though, in the gospel. He's given you his expectations. So you should be able to obey that law then.
You don't have the wherewithal to separate lust and love.
Sure you can.
No, you can't.
Why not?
Because we're not that powerful. We're not God.
What does that mean? Like, what do you mean? Because we're not God, we can't not lust?
We have fleshly desires and stuff. Like,
well, I'm not saying you can't not lust ever. I'm saying when you have a lustful thought, you bring it under submission by changing the way you think about that person.
Why wouldn't you just drop the thought? Like,
well, you can, but I'm sure it would try to come back in later. And maybe that's what it means. Maybe you push that bad thought out. Like, I could see that. Like, if you have a lustful thought, you just push the thought out. Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Because Christ wouldn't want you to.
It takes a lot of practice to do that, to get it.
Yes, but last week you said you have to empty your mind completely.
When you pray.
Okay, so not on an... Hey, I disagree with that, but normally, like, you wouldn't push out every thought. That's just meditation. You're talking about just pushing out bad thoughts. I'm saying.
That's why Christ was so prolific, because he was like constantly in prayer or meditation. Like he was dialed in all the time, and we can't replicate that. We can practice, we can pray and try to push all those thoughts out when we pray.
What does that mean, and why do you think that?
Which part?
To be dialed in. He was in meditation all the time. Like, what does that mean?
Because he was within the will of the Father.
Is he meditating
the will all the time?
So to do the Father's will now is to meditate?
Yeah, meditation. The purpose of meditation, or taking no thought, is to see what God wants you to do. Like it's to get in line with the Father's will.
Okay, I'm sorry. Say that again.
Because your thoughts are, they're always going to be, because we are flesh and we're corrupted, your thoughts are always going to be aimed towards self-service or in some way, like they're going to be prideful, lustful,
Yeah.
all these different things because we're attached to the flesh,
Yes.
right? Okay, so
Yes.
we have that tinge of sin in our thoughts, all of them.
Yes.
So pushing those out of the way, that's how you get in line with the Father's will.
So what replaces them? What's there instead?
The Father's will.
Which is?
I can't tell you that.
Well, I could say it's the moral law. Like,
Who are you to define that?
Well, the Bible defines it. I would look at the Bible and I would say, Ten
Old
Commandments,
Testament?
do unto others. Yes, all of the above. Like, all of the above. Try me on the whole, well, the Israelites did this mean thing to this people group at
Isn't
one
that a
time.
work, Gary?
Try that.
Aren't you?
Yes, you do
Isn't
the
that faith
works out
plus
of...
works?
No, because when you work, you're saying thank you because you're already saved. You're not working to gain salvation. You work out of gratitude for what God has already done for you. You're not trying to be a good person because you can't be a good person. You're a sinning sinner who sins. But you do obey the law out of gratitude. You do obey the law because you assume God has a purpose for you. There are other reasons to obey the law besides staying out of hell.
I agree.
Yeah, so no, that's not the same thing as works-based salvation. You are saved by faith alone. But just because you're saved, that doesn't mean you should like intentionally not do the law. You'll still go to heaven if you act that way, but you're going to have a bad time before you get there.
I think we're talking around each other somehow.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what you mean, and I think maybe you're thinking that I'm like arguing with you, but I'm not arguing with you. I'm just trying to understand what your methodology is.
Why do you want to think so bad?
Because I think God gave us a mind, and he wouldn't give us a mind unless he wanted us to use it. It seems very boring. And I don't think it's possible. I don't think voids exist for very long.
I agree, they don't. I mean, it takes
so
a
if
lot
you
of
clear
practice
your
to work
mind,
that.
something is going to dump in there sooner or later.
Yeah, I mean, we get intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but it's like you should still practice to not have that. Intrusive thoughts are terrible, aren't they?
sometimes.
So why would you want to keep those?
Because sometimes you also get a flash of brilliance. Sometimes God reveals something to you in a dramatic fashion. You could call that an intrusive or at the very least unexpected thought.
I don't think they're thoughts, though. They're more like revelations. Anytime I've had
Well, see, now we're just splitting hairs, and how could you tell the difference between the two if you're emptying your mind?
Shower thoughts, like shower thoughts hit you different. When you're under that water, they hit different. You just like, you understand. It's more of an understanding than like a thought.
I mean, I understand what you're talking about when you say that. I don't know if that's relegated to the shower necessarily, but I get what you're saying as far as like having an understanding versus a coherent thought that's intrusive.
Yeah.
Like, I get that. But
Like I think that's the difference. It's like the understanding is this still small voice that the Bible talks about.
well, I think the still small voice can still give you like specific instructions or specific messages, though, beyond just a general understanding.
I mean, I don't know. I guess and you have to be really, take a lot of, what word am I looking for? Responsibility with this, but like when you have a thought, if it's self-serving at all, it's like that's from the devil. Because it's like, it's fleshly, right? Like your body wants to sustain itself instead of it being like a spiritual thought where it's like that's serving others, and it's like it's a deficit to you. Like serving others is a deficit to your body. Like if you go do something for somebody and you don't get anything out of it, you don't get any, and like let your left hand not what your right hand does. Like if you don't get any praise out of it, you don't get any pride, financial gain, you don't get anything from it. It's a deficit to your flesh. right? And so that's the difference between like a God thought and a human thought. I don't
So
know.
you're saying that like a God thought is inherently going to be selfless.
Yeah.
I mean, I can agree with that. I can agree with that. I don't know if I would disagree with the idea of pushing thoughts out to get there. I think you have to actively choose good thoughts. You have to actively choose to be like Christ. I don't think you push out the bad and then the good just kind of falls in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. If you did, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Rumble. We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.